Well, good evening, everyone. This is John Craig, and I welcome you to Walking in Spirit and Truth on this third day of the week as the sun is going down here in Amarillo, Texas after this time change. So I guess we're really technically going into the fourth day of the week, but it's so good to be with you. Sandi will be joining me here shortly. So we have some very, very important things we want to talk to you about today, share some things that we've come across that we think you need to know. And so there you go. But I'm not going to say anything until Sandi gets over here and gets here. So I do want to say this is that Sandi and I pastor Life of Worship here in Amarillo, Texas, and we are still meeting. We're still gathering because we can, and because there is no prohibition of that right now in the city of Amarillo. In fact, I was just looking that up on the Amarillo government side, and it said that there are 0 cases of coronavirus in Amarillo, Texas, and as I think that's the way it is in many, many communities across the United States, in spite of all the hype that is going on. I mean, just take a minute. Breathe some shalom. Everybody needs some shalom and chill out and let the stores restock. Okay. My goodness. It is one thing here, even though there's nothing going on, there's a panic in Amarillo, Texas. There's no paper products. There's no toilet paper. There's no, the canned goods are gone. The paper, the breads are disappearing. In fact, the big bakery that's here in town said they're going to stop making or giving bread to particular stores. So I'll tell you what. There's no dried goods either. Yeah, so Sandi said there's no dried goods, so a lot of stuff is disappearing. So, but you can get a few things like potato chips. Yeah, you can get potato chips, and you can get beer. There's lots of beer. I did notice that there's cheese, and here's the one thing that's very interesting. There's produce. There is produce, except for potatoes and sweet potatoes and bananas. Those seem to have cleared the shelves. So there you go. And that's what's happening here in Amarillo. But we do have different plans that we've got going on. We do still plan on having a Seder, at least at this point in time. We're still planning for that. Now, things could change in the near future, but we've got 3 weeks to make that final decision, so to speak, but that we're still planning on gathering at our congregation to have a Seder. We're looking forward to that. And then, of course, in June, the first weekend of June, we will be having Eddie Chumney. Now, of course, if there's restrictions in travel and restrictions on that, we'll probably have to postpone that. Or maybe we could do some type of virtual video thing with Eddie Chumney. Who knows what we can do? I was just excited to see him in person. So things have changed. Things are changing quite rapidly, and a lot of reasons for that. But this isn't the show to really be talking about the what and the why behind all of the corona stuff. But I want to get to our topic tonight. And so before I go into the topic, what I'd like to do is actually preface it with some scripture. And because I think it's really important to say this is the perspective that we're coming from and why. And this might be something that you want to get out and let your friends and families know about. So I'm going to hit some things that really nobody's talking about. I'm going to hit some things that I'm not saying that this is 100 proof positive, but there are some things that I think are coming our way that the coronavirus scare is really, honestly, the big distraction. And I think we need to be talking about some other things so that we're not caught unaware of what is really happening, about to happen. And we're going to talk about that tonight. And so what am I talking about? Well, let's go over to Luke chapter 21 and talk about what Yeshua said, beginning with verse 25. This is Luke 21:25, and it reads, "And there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and upon the earth dismay among nations, in perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves, men fainting from fear and the expectation of things which are coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. So remember what Yeshua said, and the angels told the disciples as they looked at Yeshua as he was taken up in the cloud. They said, in the same way that he's leaving, he will return again. But it says, but when these things begin to take place, straighten up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. So we're really truly living in a time that is extraordinary. But why am I talking about these seemingly maybe weather events, geological events, these cosmic events, things that are happening that are outside of this world? And when everything in the world is simply causing us to focus on what's happening over here, and that is what's going on with the coronavirus, the shutdown of everything, the shutdown of transportation, shutdown of large gatherings of people, and what could actually happen, even the shutting down of internet to where we're not even able to communicate with each other this way. Shutdown of all communications, of cell phones, that where most people have given up their landlines, and now the only way we communicate is by our cell phones and textbooks and Facebook and other social media, and that's how we're connecting. What happens when those things are turned off and we're not able to get the information out and communicate what is happening? Well, I believe that there's certain, now before I get to what I think that may be happening, is there was several years ago, we had a speaker come into Life of Worship who was talking about certain things that would be happening in our solar system. And when he said this, it looked like, oh my goodness, when this thing happens, wow. Well, one of the things that stood out in my mind, he says, well, how do you know when this will happen? Of course, the government will never tell you. The media will never tell you. They don't want to cause mass panic to take place. And the reason they don't want mass panic to take place is they don't want the people to panic and freak out and burn down the cities that we live in and stop going to work and all this sort of thing. So they would have to invoke some type of controls on the society. Those types of controls of society is to control behavior, control speech, control the gathering of the people together, the communication of people. It's meant in order to get people into their homes, keep them from going out in the streets, and therefore you can invoke a whole spectrum from martial law, from complete military in our streets, shutting us down, to just, hey, we have this serious situation, don't be leaving your homes. Stay off the streets for the next few weeks. We'll let you know when it's safe to come out. You need a shelter in place, all of those type of things. And, well, what's been happening here? All of a sudden, here comes this virus. It comes out of the blue. It comes out of China. It comes, all of a sudden we see all of these videos that we cannot collaborate. We cannot figure out. No one lives in China. No one's there to visit. We don't have a lot of communications that way to say, hey, this is what's really happening. All we do is we see these videos are coming out of China where it looks like people are collapsing in the street. We see people that are a bloody mess, that are covered by sheets. We see bodies lined up like cordwood. We see furnaces that are burning so many bodies per day, and they're picking it up on radar where it shows sulfuric acid in the air, and which is related to the burning of bodies. It's actually making it, you can actually see it from space through the technology. We're seeing all different types of things like that. We see people pulled out of cars, people shot at roadblocks. Looks like a very serious situation. We see trucks driving down the street and blowing what appears to be disinfectant in the air. Is it disinfectant? I don't know. I question everything. My first thought, well, if it's this and they're throwing the disinfectant in the air and it's an airborne type of disease, maybe it is. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's Maybe it's some type of sedative type of drug is causing the people to be docile so that they won't riot against the lockdown on the cities or whatever. And are all these pictures truly Wuhan? We never saw pictures of Beijing or Shanghai or any of the other cities in China. It was always Wuhan is where they had all these things going on. But is that really Wuhan? Or could it have been Hong Kong, where they were having hundreds of thousands of people pouring out in the streets every single day, and they were calling it infectious disease and telling people that they had to lock down and shelter in place and all of that type of thing? And could it have actually been the residential areas of Hong Kong? I don't know. I just want to say we don't have verification of it. All we have are these videos, and some of them had margins on the videos, and you really can't see so much, only the things that they wanted you to see. So I just wondered, did the propaganda machine get put into place in order to cause worldwide panic, let alone in order to shut down what was happening here in the United States, or let alone shut down the entire world to limit travel, shut down air flights, shut down borders, shut down. In fact, today they shut down the borders of Mexico and Canada. Well, they should have shut down the borders of that for a long time because they had open borders. In fact, they said, why are you shutting down the borders from these infected countries? In spite of all the other countries already shutting that down. It doesn't make sense as to why they're doing it. And then all of a sudden, now they are, and President Trump has done these things because they say the spread of this virus is dangerous. They want to get ahead of it. They don't want things happening like what they saw or what they're seeing right now in Italy.
But your point about Wuhan was, is it another Sandy Hook like thing where it's all played out for us?
Is it drama? Is it theater? Is it just to control people and to make them think it's one thing? Is it really another? Yeah. So in other words, it's the big hand over here. It's all this stuff that's happening. Pay attention here, watch here, because what's really going on.
Well, you had said over here, maybe it was getting rid of the we already know that they wanted to get rid of the dissidents, and they were doing that and using it as opportunity.
Yeah. And what about these people with the bloody shrouds over them? Well, maybe it's organ harvesting. It could very well have been that. It is.
Who knows?
Who knows? It's the cynical side of me says, wait a minute, step back. Why all the focus? So these are some things that I'm looking at now. What has really got my attention is that last week I was listening to a broadcast where there's a particular gentleman that's been on there, works for the government, was not able to talk about a lot of different things because they're highly classified. So he can talk around the subject, but if he gets on the subject, of course, he could be arrested for divulging classified material. But I've been listening to this guy for years, and the things that he's been talking about and the things that he's been proposing that's been going on in the earth, and the earth changes, geological changes, solar changes, he has been dead on. And some of those things have to talk about the change of the UVB, ultraviolet rays that are coming in from the sun, that they would begin to change from UVB to UVC, and which is a lot of the radiation we're getting from the sun now because of the changes that are going on in the sun. It's about an increase of radiation from the sun that's getting through to the earth, where you can actually go out and feel this. If you feel the sunlight on your skin and it starts to feel tingly, it's especially, or it feels hot and it's 50 degrees outside, but in the sun, it just feels super hot. I was noticing that the other day. I was like, man, I'm sitting there pumping gas and man, I'm chilly in the shade pumping gas, but I step out in the sun and it's like, whew, take my jacket off type of thing. And what is that? It's an increase of radiation. He was talking about how in the last few days, or since the beginning of 2020 on our calendar in the West has been an 18% increase of solar radiation on the earth. Can you believe that? 18% increase of solar radiation. So,
but what about the radiation that's not from the sun?
And there is the radiation that's coming in that's earthbound, but it's not coming in from the direction of the sun, because a lot of times we get most of our radiation hits the earth from the sun. and it hits the electromagnetic field around the Earth, which pushes it around the Earth and sends it out into the solar system. But we've been getting hit from the opposite side of the sun, and radiation has been coming in. And here's
what
how.
Could that be from?
Here's some of the things that how it's affecting the Earth. When the radiation, we've talked about in our congregation, so those that have been listening online, you know that I've talked about this a lot, but this is what happens when the radiation comes in and it hits the electromagnetic field of the Earth. The field directs it to the poles. So when it hits the poles, then the radiation goes into the core of the Earth, and the Earth absorbs that energy. So why? It's to protect us. It protects plant life, animal life, human life in the Earth. The energy goes into the core of the Earth, and it's causing the Earth to warm up. So with the increase of the
center of the Earth,
the center of the Earth is heating up. Well, that energy has to go somewhere. What we're seeing in the Earth now, and what we've been watching over the last several years, is an increase in earthquake activity, especially around the Ring of Fire and around the major fault lines that go throughout the Earth. When the energy comes in fact, a lot of times if we get hit by the sun by a big a pulse, then the energy will come in, and within a few days, there will be an earthquake. It usually starts in the South Pacific. And from there, then you can actually trace the earthquakes every so many days of a certain magnitude at certain places around the crust of the Earth. You can follow it from there. It'll take you through to Indonesia, across India, over into the Middle East and up into Europe. The other side takes you around China, Japan, Alaska, down the coastline. In the other direction, it takes you to South America and into the South Atlantic. So these type of things have been going on, and most of us don't pay attention because we're not watching the earthquake numbers. But along with it, with the heating of the Earth and the heating up and the cracking, there's a cracking of the mantle that's going on. That is because the heat is causing the mantle of the Earth to begin to crack, and so we're getting more earthquake activities that way.
Fresh lakes being drained.
Yeah, fresh lakes. There was one picture the other day. There was a crack opened up and a lake completely emptied out. And we've had earthquakes off of Puerto Rico and over in the Caribbean. And because off the trench on that side, there have been splits that are opening up. There's been earthquakes and volcanic activity under the sea. The west coast of the United States, along the Pacific coast, there is the warmest it's been in years, and I would have to say like decades, maybe centuries, because of the warming of the waters is not from any man-made source. It's because of the what's going on under the Earth, and it's heating up the waters of the Pacific Ocean. I remember as a kid, I went swimming on the West Coast, off the coast there in Los Angeles and stuff. It was cold water. It's cold water, and but they're saying it was cold water. But nevertheless, these are the things that what's happening in the cosmic realm around the Earth is affecting the Earth, and it's affecting these patterns. And so what we read earlier, there was going to be signs, but we've never seen things like signs in the sun and the moon and the stars upon the earth, dismay among nations and perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves, and men fainting from fear and the expectation of things that are coming upon the world. As for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. So we've not seen a lot of shaking going on. Now, those that watch the heavens have been talking about how they've watched Neptune, they've watched Jupiter, they've watched these different planets that are out there, and have seen that there's been disturbances out in the solar system that are actually affecting these planets. But on top of that, there have also been this radiation that has been coming into the solar system from another source. Now, one of the elements about the solar system that we're in, and I'm sorry if you're a flat earth person, you'll probably say, well, I don't want to listen to that. I disagree with it. Okay. All right. If you're, then put it on a shelf and just kind of bear with me. But the solar system is actually moving. It's not stationary. It's
not static.
It's not static. In fact, everything in the galaxies out there are moving. They are all working with each other. They actually are communicating with us with frequencies, and that's the way. I mean, that's the way God works. And then in the beginning, God said, right? Yahweh said, and things were put into motions and things were created. And because everything is made from frequencies. Well, these frequencies and radiation that's out there is they come in waves. And what this gentleman spoke about is that there would be 5 waves of energy that would be coming into our solar system. We've experienced at least 3 of them, possibly 4, but right now we're in the process of having several of these large radiation hits coming from the solar system hitting the Earth, and it's been going on since December. And there was a hit that came in December and a hit that came in January. And when those hits came, there were actually some very large earthquakes that took place in certain parts of the world as the Earth was absorbing the energy of that radiation. It's gamma radiation. Well, the other thing that he was talking about, and he said these are going to start hitting. He gave us dates, and those dates match what he told us. He said what would also be happening is that the Earth would begin passing through this major dust field, and it would begin in December. And anybody that was able to measure or calculate the dust, if you had the instrumentation to do it, I suppose the guys at NASA or any type of university that studies these things or have the capabilities of studying the particles that have been coming on the Earth. But it was a layer of dust. And he said what's going to happen is that this dust is going to become larger and larger. The dust field precedes what is coming. So that was in December. Then he came out and in January, he started talking about what we should be expecting here in the spring, especially as we get into March, April, and it would culminate in May.
Or begin the culmination
in May. And he said, this is what we should expect to see. Now, before I say this, I want you to recall some things that have happened in the past that have actually been unusual in the past decade, but we've been seeing it more and more happening around the world. And that has to do with meteors, and that we see the falling stars, so that we call them falling stars, but we know that these are meteors, and they've been hitting our atmosphere. And we've been getting more and more people coming out and talking about fireballs and meteors that seem unusual.
I've seen them.
In fact, you saw one, right?
Yes.
You were.
It was neon green, and it hit no more than 100 feet from us. So
it was like, so here's come right across, light up the sky all of a sudden, flash of light, and we've seen YouTube videos of these different meteors and fireballs that are going on, and heard reports of it going on around the country, even around the world. The frequencies of these have been increasing. So signs in the heavens, suns, moon, and stars coming upon the earth. In the recent days, within the last week or two, there was actually a meteor that struck in India. It didn't just burn up. Most meteors will burn up in the atmosphere, and we see it and they kind of dissipate. Sometimes you get to see them, and as they break up into small particles, and you see a bunch of little ones fragmenting off, and they burn and they disappear. They don't hit the earth. If you remember back I think it was in 2013, there was a major meteor that came, and it came across Russia. And by the time it got to before it actually exploded, it was over a city in the middle of Russia. And when that took place, that meteor exploded, and it was like a bomb that went off, and it exploded in the atmosphere, and windows were blown out. People were injured by the flying debris from this. This was a major event that is still talked about today. Well, what this gentleman was talking about was this increase of this dust field and the particles that the Earth would be passing through. And I'm talking about it's not just that here's this dust field and the Earth has this path that it follows and it goes through the dust field and comes out the other side. I'm talking about this solar system that's passing through a dust field. I mean, this has been a pretty big deal. Well, it would first be a dust field, and then which would be able to be measured, and then the particles would begin getting larger. The particles would be seen larger. We would start seeing more frequency of falling stars, so to speak, meteors coming across our skies. We would start not only that, but then he gave this warning. He said that they would begin hitting the Earth. And he gave a date. He said it was a big deal. It was like May the 14th. You set these dates and people start to freak out. But he said it was May the 12th, May the 14th. I don't know. It's just in that mid part of May that something was going to take place that was going to be huge. Very, very big event taking place. But by the time that we as people that live in this world, by the time we got there, that we would be facing truly this situation here in Luke, where it's talking about men fainting from fear and the expectation of those things which are coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And am I saying, with all that I've talked about, with talking about the element of needing martial law before severe events began to take place upon the earth, before these things were to take place, would this be a time that they have some type of excuse in place in order to get people locked down so as to prevent panic, to prevent rioting, to keep people in a particular place when these events would start to take place? And so this is one side of the story. As we're watching all of this stuff with the coronavirus, all of the lockdowns, all these things taking place, and the shelves are going empty. They are empty. They're having difficulty redistributing and getting product to the stores. The government going all the way back to January when they started buying up all sorts of food storage, long-term foods. They were buying them up and putting them away and storing them away. And now if you wanted to buy long-term storage food, if you get it shipped to your house, it's not available. In fact, I learned today that even the My Patriot Supply even that is coming to an end, because they don't believe they can get it to people with the shutdown that looks like it's coming to place, even the shutdown of interstate travel. And so why did the government buy up all this food? Is it because of coronavirus, or is it because of something else? Now, so this is one source. I'm going to lace some things together. And we got reports. I got a report on Sunday from Stephen Ben-Nun, and he was Israeli News Live, which is Israeli News Live, and he has a background from the CIA. He's connected. You can get all sorts of news information that he reports on around the world, and you can pick up his YouTube. He's got his other ways that you can communicate with him, but he has access and he has resources by which he talks to. I don't have these resources, but I do pay attention to what's going on. I listen to those things around, and I put things up on the shelf that I'd say, I don't know about that. But there's certain things that all of a sudden, there are certain one point here and one point there and one point there that all of a sudden these things connect. And that's what I'm talking about tonight. Those things that have connected with the source I heard from last week, and then Stephen Ben-Nun on Sunday. And that's why I wanted to bring it to you, because I feel like these are data points that we all need to talk about. What if this coronavirus and the shutdown and the lockdown of interstate travel, all of these things, what if it's not? What if it's not about the coronavirus? Coronavirus is highly contagious. It seems to there's a lot of different things about it. Some people say those that have gotten it can be very, very sick. Some get it, it's very, very light, don't even know they barely even have it. I mean, we have a whole spectrum of things. We know that it affects different ages, but what if they're using this as an opportunity to have control over the most free nation in the world, where we are the most free? We have the First Amendment, we have the Second Amendment, and they would use this in order to confiscate our weapons, to take our free speech, in order to shut us down into place, declare martial law. And because when this thing finally leaks out and it starts hitting the internet and it starts hitting the news, then you're going to have mass panic. I don't even know if this broadcast will even stay on the air for very long, just simply because since I'm a nobody, it probably will, because as somebody that doesn't have a big voice out there, then they'll probably say, oh yeah, this guy's just a fruitcake. But nevertheless, what I am saying, when we go back to Scripture and we see this happening, why would they lock everything down? What seems to be something when the H1N1 or swine flu affected the United States, or Ebola had much greater risk, where we had thousands of people that were dying from it, then why does this thing have the feet that it has? Why are they using this virus as the one that they're going to? Now I want to take you to another passage to take a look at and say, okay, let's connect the dots maybe from another witness within Scripture that might give us another clue what's going on. So I want you to open up your Bibles. You got them with you. Let's go look at Revelation chapter 6. Of course, in chapter 6, we start of Revelation, we're looking at the seals. And in the seals, beginning with verse 12, we have the sixth seal. And it says here in Revelation chapter 6, verse 12, and it says, and I looked, and when he broke the sixth seal, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth, and made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood. Now, let's stop there for just a second to describe what could be going on. We've had all sorts of different opinions over the years what this could be looking like. One of the things that I want to suggest to you is something that I heard from Stephen Ben-Nun, and he said that some of the experts believe that before the end of 2020, we might actually see the New Madrid Fault break open and break loose. There could be a major earthquake along the New Madrid Fault before the end of the year. When we're looking at all these other things I've talked about in the world, it could very well be. Well,
but preceding that.
And so could that be part of a great earthquake, not in the New Madrid Fault, but other fault lines all breaking up at the same time? Here's the next thing. It says the sun become black as sackcloth and made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood. Well, part of what this dust field that's coming in, so we're going to have dust along with some of these meteors, is the effect upon the sun, is because it will create a red like glow. Hey, stay out of that. My cat's getting into my dinner. And so let's go on. And this verse 13 says this, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. And the sky was split apart like a scroll, and when it rolled up, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the commanders, and the rich, and the strong, and every slave and free man hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand. Well, what was the next interesting thing about this date in May that I want to really tie this in, that unless you've been following the Hebraic roots of your faith, you really don't know this, because we think about, present what first?
I think you need to say what he said first before you do that.
So let's look at this. I'm going to follow Sandy's advice and say, okay, what are you talking about, John? What are these things that seem to be so big? Well, coming from the scriptures and looking at this, and then talking about what both Stephen Ben-Nun and this other person was talking about, and others, let's connect some of the dots. We've been going through a dust field. We've been going through radiation. We've been getting blasts of radiation on the earth. They're all coming from places from the other side of the earth, not from the sun. As the earth is passing through this dust cloud, the particles get bigger and bigger, that we're going to begin passing through an asteroid field. Not necessarily the asteroid field that may be between Mars and Jupiter that's been pushed our direction. Maybe it is. I don't know. I don't have access to those things. But what they've been saying, because of their experts, because of their government sources, because of these things that have gotten out, is that the Earth will begin passing through an asteroid field, and we're going to start seeing more and more impacts of asteroids or meteors upon the Earth. When these meteors hit the Earth, it's going to start causing panic.
It will be city and state.
And some of these meteors, when they hit the Earth, they could be city killers.
In fact, I think we need to say the extent.
Oh, okay. Hold on just a second. So by the time the big event happens in mid-May, that there have been so many impacts upon the earth, it will be like over there in Luke 21, where it will say men fainting from fear and the expectation of things that are coming upon the world. Now, when you look in the Greek, upon literally mean it's like it can be coming upon, it can be as if something's thrown upon, it could be something. In other words, it could very well be hitting an asteroid field that causes these meteors to begin striking and pulminating the earth, and we're going to start seeing an increase in intensity of that leading up to May.
But what did the government sources say about it?
So the thing that's about what is hitting the earth and coming in May is so big that we won't even be thinking about this coronavirus thing. It'll be so large.
It is.
Well, why don't you say it? Sandy's off. She's trying to keep me on track. I'm trying to keep it tempered here.
What you need to do, though, is get to the point. What is supposed to happen is that there will be pretty much most of the earth will be pummeled so badly that nobody will live. Now, of course, we know Yah and all of that. Now, what's really interesting, there's a pocket in Israel, Saudi Arabia, those areas that is a safe zone, Central Africa, and 2 states in the U.S., which are Nebraska and Kansas. But the government sources say
Missouri
and Nebraska. But the government sources say that there will be nothing else that will survive in the United States and Russia and Western Europe and things like that.
They said Northern Europe will be gone.
Which reminds me of what Eddie Chumney has always said, is that the U.S. will be as a haunt, not even a haunt for jackals.
It'll be
that haunt. It would decimated. And because Eddie Chumney's talked about that, Gil Broussard and things like that. And that when you listen to Stephen Ben-Nun, he talks about how all of this is a ploy so that they can lock people down, so there's no panic, so they can control the situation. Because when this hits, they won't have to say contain the people, because they will already be contained.
Right. Now, Gil Broussard, way back when we started listening to him about Planet 7X, and he talked about the martial law would be put in force first before Planet 7X could be revealed. And you know that it would be revealed because 6 months to a year prior to it being revealed, then there would be martial law put into place. Well, so whether it's Planet 7X that's pushing these meteors this direction or not, we don't know.
Or just going through a belt.
Or we're going through a belt of asteroids that are out there. nevertheless, the earth is about ready to go through this. Now, Stephen Ben-Nun, let me clarify this, said 3 to 6 months.
And it's the other source that has said that we will begin seeing these things will begin making impact on around May 12th, which is May 12th.
The beginning would begin in March, but the major a part of the asteroid field that the Earth goes through will be in May. And he said, as we start going into this asteroid field, he said, we will start noticing the changes here on the Earth.
Atmospheric changes.
We'll see atmospheric changes.
Colors. The atmosphere will be different.
It'll be different colors. We'll look in the sky and say, man, it's really different up there. We'll start seeing the effect in terms of the rotation of the Earth. So our days and nights might get mixed up. It could cause our days to be longer, our nights to be shorter. Who knows?
Just completely opposite.
It could cause the pole shift. Who knows what it could do? But it's actually going to affect the rotation of the Earth, but it'll also end up being that the Earth will be plummeted by these meteors as we go through.
Now, these sources have also said once they get through this coronavirus thing, martial law will not be lifted. It will continue. Once the whole point was to get it started till this thing is seen through. And these are government sources, folks. It's not us. That all of this has been. This is why you see the heads of companies like Bill Gates and others stepping down from their positions and leaving. So, and there's many. It's not just a few.
There's dozens.
A lot of the deep state people have taken off.
And there's been, and you can go and you can check it from regular sources. There's been a lot of air traffic going into New Zealand with these people. So why? Because in New Zealand, for some reason, might be a safe zone, and that's where they built their bunkers. But here's the other thing about their bunkers that they're discovering is that because of the water that has been like these lakes being drained of water and that type of thing. Well, the things with the earthquakes and the shaking going on, it's causing these bunkers to crack, and they are leaking. They do have water in them. So what is about to happen to the Earth is going to be so huge of a deal. This coronavirus, guys, is nothing. It is nothing. And that's what we're trying to talk about, is that the sixth seal, and my Bible even actually titles it the sixth seal terror, where it's so bad that the kings of the earth, the great men and the commanders and the rich and among the strong and the slave and the free men hide in the caves and among the rocks, the mountains, and they want the mountains to fall on them. Because it's so, the terror of it is so big.
But here's what's fascinating. If you use the dates projected, some of the dates ish. I mean, like I said, like he said, Stephen Ben-Nun says it. His sources say it's 3 to 6 months, but it still could be, because the other source says that the big thing will start around May 12th to 14th, whatever date that was. But guys, that's around the second Passover time.
Yes. Okay. So let's look at that real quick. Is that second Passover is around May the 8th, and so what is the anniversary of second Passover? If you actually look at it within the scripture, it is the time that Moses was shut up. Yeah. Noah. I'm sorry. I said Moses. It's Noah. Noah. He was shut up in the ark. And then
for 7 days,
and then judgment came on the seventh day. And so it's very interesting to see that second Passover occurs
in this window,
in this window of time, and then judgment takes place.
I also find it very interesting that one of the safe zones would be at Mount Zion, at Mount Sinai, not Mount Zion.
Sinai, yeah.
So wouldn't it be interesting? It sort of reminds me of some of Steve Mutria's teaching, that we would be gathered around, and it's not Armageddon, it's Har Moed, the mountain of the Lord, the mountain. These are things I don't know, because we don't have to worry about it, because Yah takes care of us, and he can create pockets of protection. If this thing is true, if the government sources are correct and this thing is happening, he can create pockets of protection for us. He can supernaturally translate us. He can do all he loves his bride. We pray the scriptures, we stand on the truth, but we don't sit there and fret, but we do need to prepare, because people's hearts need to be made right. We need to be witnessing and out there talking, because potentially, if this is true, it means a complete change in our world, and a lot of the world completely wiped out, which some of our own teachers has said are, like I said earlier, that the United States in particular, would be uninhabitable. And I've always thought, I wonder how that would happen. Well, that fits, doesn't it?
A lot of times we've been looking at is it going to be a nuclear event? Are we going to be attacked by another country? It's going to wipe us out because nuclear war is so horrific. But no one has ever talked about this type of thing just in such a severe way, except I will have to say the only person I've ever talked about was Gil Broussard. And he talked about because this planet 7X goes through the asteroid field and pulls with it asteroids, and it passes across the plane of the Earth as it's going around the sun, and so it leaves a debris field which the Earth passes through twice.
But think of this as the stone. What happened? They stoned the adulterers. We see that in the Brit Hadashah. We see with the woman that Yeshua took care. I mean,
so the adulterous bride,
was stoned, and this is a stoning of the adulterous bride.
The punishment of this adulterous bride is stoning. But here's the thing: that's the adulterous bride, and are we the adulterous bride? Well, I sure hope not. If we're listening to this broadcast, that we're not, that we shouldn't be having a bed of mixture, like it says in the Church of Laodicea. But let me just read this to you. And this is from Isaiah. So we've got a third witness within Scripture, Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 12. For the of Yahweh of hosts will have a day of reckoning against everyone who is proud and lofty, and against everyone who is lifted up, that he may be abased. Now skipping down to verse 19. And men will go into caves of the rocks and into the holes of the ground before the terror of Yahweh and before the splendor of his majesty, when he arises to make the earth tremble. In that day men will cast away to the moles and the bats and their idols of silver, and their idols of gold, which they made for themselves to worship, in order to go up into the caverns of the rocks and of the clefts and the cliffs, and before the terror of Yahweh and the splendor of his majesty, when he arises to make the earth tremble. Stop regarding man, whose breath of life is in his nostrils, for why should he be esteemed? So in other words, guess what? Look, all of the elite of the earth that's often talked about, all these people that have all this control over our lives and that type of thing, that we feel like, man, how do we ever get away from them? Well, here's Yahweh's solution. They're running. Why should we even esteem them at all? They're running to the caves, and it's going to be so horrific that they're gonna pray that those caves collapse on them. Those mountains where their bunkers are would collapse on them, and just end it now. That's how the terror of Yahweh is when he comes. But when we looked at back in Luke chapter 21, what's it about? It's before the great coming of the Son of Man. This is such a big deal. And I want to hit something else in a second, but go ahead.
I was going to say, you were reminded. Now, did you stop me? I just went blank.
I'm sorry. So
I'm going to interrupt you when I remember.
Okay, so when we look at this, well, you think, well, if this thing is, who can be saved? Well, there's two sides of this story of who can be saved. First off, there's Psalm 91. And Psalm 91, by the way, is not an incantation, a spell or something we can just say and we invoke the protection of God. No, it's about an action, because being Hebrew is an action. It's about dwelling in the secret place of the Most High. And you go look at it, and it says you have 1,000 at your side and 10,000 at your right hand,
but it will not come nigh you.
That's right. This is
have you seen that? No, this is talking about something catastrophic.
So catastrophic.
10,000 at your right hand. Imagine that devastation before you. And what I was going to say, and I think Stephen Ben-Nun pointed this out, he said, why do we see when Israel attacked that the United States doesn't come to help? Because the United States is no more. And where do we see that's not affected? It's part of western Syria and Israel, parts of Jordan, and into the Middle East. Well, Saudi Arabia.
When you think about that area there, Syria, parts of Jordan, Israel, all of that. What is that? That is the land that was given to Abraham. All of that was the 12 tribes. They settled in those lands. They're protected. It's actually our refuge, eventually our refuge to get there. But when I'm talking about this, now let's tie some other things that go in, and that has to do with the prophecies of Dimitri Duduman and Henry Gruver. Now, Henry Gruver talks about encampments of people that are praying people that are praying and they're worshiping, they're praising God. What puts you into the secret place of the Most High except worship? It's where you've transcended from this place of saying, oh God, I thank you for this, that, and the other, and we have our petitions and we go on. No, it's where you just get caught up in his presence that time doesn't even matter. These places, these groups, these people that are praising, they're worshiping, they're in his presence, that when the things happen and they're falling all the way around, these people are protected. These people experience truly Psalm 91 in all of its protection. Wherever they may be, the Yahweh can supernaturally, even if the area that you're sitting in right now says, I don't even have a way to get out of here. Well, I've seen within Scripture that there's supernatural translation. That's right. Supernatural. There were people translated. Philip was translated from the Philippian, not the Philippian. Philip was translated from talking to the Ethiopian eunuch. From there to all of a sudden he's in another town. He's gone. Why can we not expect supernatural deliverance that all of a sudden we're in one place and we're in another place because, well, it was coming upon the area that we were in? Why should we think that we have to bug out to one way to find a place of refuge unless God says, okay, you need to go to such place and that's where I'm leading you to be and dwell in right now? Because unless you have connections, you get there and you've got your supplies, it's going to be very difficult to live. That's just the way the world is. But the Father can move us there. The Father can move us to certain places. The Father can take us to Mount Sinai and the mountain of the festivals, the mount of the feast, Mount Moed, and or Ar Moed.
Ar Moed.
Yeah, that if you go back to the Old English, it's actually an attempt to translate the Hebrew of Har Moed.
And Har's mountain.
Yeah, Har
Mountain
Moed.
of the feast.
So these are just some things. Now, this is really serious, folks. And that's the way Sandi and I are taking this, that this is really, really serious. What we're seeing with the coronavirus, okay, it's a real disease. It's a real bioweapon that was been released. It's been spliced in with SARS and HIV for gain of function.
But most have said it's pretty benign.
But here it is. So. This thing is being used, and it's being used to bring hype. It's causing fear, but it's causing people to panic buy.
And it's so disproportionate to what the effects actually are.
It is disproportionate. And yet the purpose is to get people back into their cities, back into their homes, off the roads, off the highways, and to shelter in place. Well, right now they're saying many places, shelter in place for 2 weeks. Shelter in place. If you've been exposed, shelter in place for 2 weeks and you can come back to work. You can take your work home. One company I worked for has said, we're go work from home and we'll continue our business. And those are, that's a reality that's affecting us. The thing is that I don't think in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, they're going to say, okay, it's all clear. Let's go back to work.
Well,
again.
If this is the case, it's all been preparation for this. So it's going to,
so I want you to pay attention. Don't take what I say. You go and research it yourself. Go listen to Stephen Ben-Nun. Listen to what he had to say. Listen to some of these other sources that are out there. In fact, there's not a lot. There's just not a lot just yet. They're actually talking about the unfolding of these biblical events that could very well be the seals of God. I mean, these things have been happening recently. You could actually say, I think we might be seeing the seals of God being released on the earth. The locust, the pestilence, the disease, the famine, the things that the war. One of the things that we're looking at too is that they're starting to blame each other. You released a bioweapon on us. No, we didn't do it. You did it. This is your fault. Well, these type of things, they've been looking for a reason to escalate into war. The National Guard in the United States has been called up, and they've been
26 days,
they've been so they can be used and employed into the streets in order to maintain civil unrest and to keep people from traveling outside of their homes. These are some things that we're looking at. But what I'm looking at and I'm paying most attention to is what's happening in our atmosphere. The atmosphere in and of itself is the sign, because Yeshua said it. He said it in Luke 21. And if it's going to be, we have different colors in our atmosphere,
or changes
in our atmosphere. If we start seeing,
but we're already seeing that.
If we're starting to see more and more meteor strikes, and you're starting to catch more, and the frequency of that goes on, as we see the frequency of the earthquakes and the volcanoes and those things happening on the earth, I'm going to tell you, this is the reason for the shutdown.
But here's the next thing you need to be aware of, is that you don't want to be the frog in the pot. It reminds me of Dante's Peak, how the guy went in to check some geological stuff, and it seemed because the guy saw incrementally some things happen at the end, they said, well, it's nothing. But it was really, he says, if you would have seen this 10 days ago and put it all together, you would have said this is a major thing.
Right.
We don't want to be the frog in the pot that sees things gradually change, and because we become accustomed to it, then we say, oh, it's nothing.
Right. We've always talked about being prepared. We've always talked about the day would come that martial law would hit the land. We thought that martial law would come because Hillary Clinton might have ended up being president, and she wasn't. But you know what? This is really, really serious. And I don't think we would have brought this to the broadcast today had we not started putting the pieces together. I woke up the other morning, Monday morning, and the thing, after the dots connected, it's that early morning time, when in that time of sleep, and the dots are connecting, and I woke up, I said, oh my goodness, this is what the lockdown is all about. This is what, why they're stopping the air flights. One of the reasons they're stopping the air flights is because it's dangerous to fly. Radiation, the radiation poisoning that you can get when you fly is very high. And it's increasing because, of course, the radiation that's coming from both sides. That's coming in, the radiation from the sun, the changing in the ultraviolet rays, and all that type of thing. Pilots have to do things in order to protect their health. And why would they take planes out of the sky other than the risk of those flights, the radiation on those people? Why not bring them to the earth? Now, one of the things that this person talked about, that not only these meteors, they're going to be hitting the earth, but he said airplanes will fall from the sky because of the atmospheric changes. For no reason at all of a sudden they'll fall from the sky. If you've got a loved one that's flying right now, you just pray. You just pray for their safety and their protection. I don't understand those things. I'm not a scientist, but these are the things that these people have been talking about. They've got the connections. This one guy is a scientist, and he maps these things. He's paying it, and that's his job, and to understand. So we're going to bring this to a close. As we get more information, we will pass it on, and we want you to be aware. We don't want you to be caught unaware. We don't want you to be frightful. And we want you to go to work. We want you to live it out, because you need to be a light. You need to be a light in your community. You need to be a light wherever you're at. God is using you. You're where you're supposed to be. Yes, you think you're supposed to be somewhere else. Where you're at is where you're supposed to be. And so That's just really important for us to know. And the other thing is what if you get caught and a meteor does kill you? Well, guess what? To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. It'll be instantaneous. I was thinking about that myself. It's like, oh, you know what? I guess it doesn't really matter. I've always wanted to be on the second Exodus. I want to be on this journey. I want to see Yeshua. I want to be at the mountain. I want to be all these different places. But you know what? If he calls me a different direction and my life is just snuffed out just like that, then I just pray that I at least fulfill the purposes for which he called me. So that's what we need to be doing, is fulfilling our purposes. But that is what I wanted to conclude with today. So on behalf of Walking in Spirit and Truth, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And we'd love to hear from you. And you can connect with us by emailing us at low@lifeofworshipamarillo.org.
Or go to our website, hook up to some other teachings, our YouTube channel, all sorts of things at www.lifeofworshipamarillo.org.
That's right. And if you appreciate this broadcast and this ministry that we're bringing here on Messianic Lamb Radio, you can also go to our website and there's a donate button, and we appreciate
Partner with us.
And yes, partner with us. We appreciate that financial support and prayer support. So, well, until next time, thank you so much for being part of this broadcast, and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed what you listened to. And shalom.